Now we're going to talk about the rules that apply to the pitcher, his legal pitching positions and what he can do from those positions. And we'll talk a little bit about the basics of the balk rules. Now we're going to talk about the legal positions that the pitcher can be in. The first one will be the wind-up position. There's some things you have to know. The rule book states specific things, but in reality, over the last many years, a lot of these rules aren't technically enforced. We're going to kind of go over the technicality of the rule and then what the real world is. Basically, the wind-up position is when his feet are pointing towards the batter, and he's, according to the rule book, must have both feet within the rubber. Okay? And they have to be in contact with the rubber. So he can have them like this, like this, like this, like this, like this. As long as he's facing the batter, he's considered in the wind-up position. From that position, he can take one step backward and one step forward with his free foot. The free foot is the opposite of his throwing hand. The pivot foot is the same side as his throwing hand. So he can take one step back and one step forward. And that's what it means. And the backward step, according to the rule book, is supposed to be directly back behind the rubber, not to either side. This is something that over the years has pretty much been ignored. You're going to see people stand like this, and they're going to wind up like this. Technically, that's not corrected by the rule, but it's accepted at all levels of play. So if he stands up here like this and winds up by stepping that way, it's still legal. The problem comes in when there's a runner on first base or bases loaded or something and he winds up. This could be considered a step towards the base, but if that's the way he always winds up, you're going to consider that part of his motion. So therefore, it would not be a balk, it would be part of his pitch, but you would never then allow him to step this way and throw to a base. Okay? So, wind-up position, it's facing the batter, both feet in contact with the rubber. He can take one step back and one step forward. He can also, there's three things you can do when you're on the rubber. One is throw a pitch, disengage, and when you disengage, you must disengage with your pivot foot and step backwards. Okay? Or you can step and throw to a base. Now it's tricky from the wind-up position. He must step and throw to that base without doing anything that looks like his natural motion to pitch. So he would have to just step and throw. He couldn't do anything that looks like his wind-up. That's pretty much the basics of the wind-up position. Now we'll go to the set position. The set position is where the feet, both feet are in front of the rubber and they're parallel. And the pivot foot is in contact with the rubber. Now prior to coming set, he must have his hands apart. And then the true set position is when his hands come together. He must bring his hands together before he throws a pitch. He doesn't have to bring his hands together before he throws to a base. From this position, again, he can do three things. He can throw a pitch. He can disengage by moving his pivot foot backwards off the rubber. Or he can step and throw to a base. Those are the three things he can do. Now, he must come set before he throws a pitch. Okay. Those are the legal positions. Now we'll talk about the balks. Now we're going to talk a little bit about balks. We're not going to get into real serious detail here. I'm going to give you the overall simple view of it. Basically, the balk rule is intended to prevent ridiculous stuff, like back in 1885 or whatever, to stop the pitcher from doing one thing and then doing another. For instance, if there's a runner on first base and he doesn't want the guy to steal, the rule was intended to stop something like this. Okay? Where he starts to pitch, actually goes through the motion, and then the runner might take off, and then he turns around and throws. Right? And that's an exaggerated example. Nowadays, nobody does anything like that because they try to get away with it and try to deceive the runner as to when he's going to throw a pitch and when he's going to throw to the base. So that's an exaggerated example. The other example would be if he started to throw to the base and then turned around and threw a pitch. Right? Now again, that's an exaggerated example, but that's what the rule is for, is to prevent you from starting one thing and doing another. It's also, he can't step off the rubber, step back on and quickly pitch. Or step off the rubber, step back on and quickly go to a base. The purpose of the rule is to make sure that he starts or finishes what he starts. Right? So if you start to pitch, you got to finish. If you start to throw to a base, you have to finish. If you start to disengage, you have to finish. It's really pretty much as simple as that, and it's a judgment call. So the umpire has to judge at what point he started his pitch, in which case he would have to finish it. Or what time he started to go to a base, he would have to finish it. So those are the three basic things. Typically what happens is, if a pitcher is standing here like this, and he lifts his foot up and puts it back down, that's going to be a balk. Well, and why is that? Well, he started to do something. We don't know whether he was going to go to a base or to home yet, but he didn't finish it. Right? So that's what balk means, that you interrupt something. So that's one example of a balk. Another example is when he turns like this to look at first, and then he comes back and throws a pitch. Right? This turn would mean that he was starting to throw to the base, and then he interrupted it to throw the pitch. So it's a balk because he didn't finish what he started. If the pitcher lifts this leg up and goes back down, right? Same thing. We don't know if he was going to engage or what he was going to do, but he didn't finish it. Okay? Again, there's some things that are technically in the rule book that are not judged that way in the real world anymore. He's supposed to step and throw to a base, which means if I want to throw to first base, I can't do anything that looks like my windup or the start of a pitch. I have to step and throw there. So the very basic things, if you watch my footwork, okay, the minimum thing that he has to do is step and throw. And he must step ahead of the throw. He can't do that. Right? He's got to step in the direction. Right? Now, in the real world, they try to cut that down to as small as possible. So the minimum that he has to do is get some distance and direction toward the base. So if you look at my front foot, the foot has to come off the ground, move and land in a different spot from where it started. So my front foot has to at least do this. Okay? It has to come up and drop in a different spot. Okay? Now, according to the rule, you have to step and throw. Most people nowadays do what's called a jab step or a jump turn. They'll move this foot first and turn and throw. If you went strictly by the words in the rule book, that would be illegal. But it's interpreted by professional umpires as being still in contact with the rubber, and it all happens so quick that it's part of being in contact with the rubber and stepping and throwing to the base, as long as it's all done in one quick motion. So a jab step would be like that. Right? That would be legal. Okay? Or a jump. Okay? There's a lot of confusion. People think that he has to step off. He does not have to step off the rubber to throw to a base. Right? When he's on the rubber and he throws, and if he threw the ball out of play, the runners would get one base. If he steps off the rubber, he's no longer the pitcher. So he can't balk once he comes off the rubber. He's no longer the pitcher. But now, if he comes off the rubber, he's an infielder, and if he throws this ball over that fence, the runner on first is going to get two bases. Now, that's basically all we're going to cover about the balks. It's just essentially he has to finish what he started, and he can do three things: throw a pitch, throw to a base, or step off. Okay? And in baseball rules, he can do it from either the windup or the set. So even if he was in the windup position, he can still throw to a base, but this gets tricky because he has to do it without doing anything that looked like his windup. If he moves his hands up, or he moves his foot back, or rocks, does anything that you, in your judgment, it's a judgment call, look like his normal move to pitch, and then he interrupts that and throws to a base, it's a balk. He can throw to a base from the windup, but he has to do it without doing anything that looks like a windup. And when a lot of times what they try to get away with is this. Now, he disengaged, they'll claim that they disengaged, so he's no longer the pitcher, but he moved his hands first. Right? This motion is part of the pitch, so that would be a balk. If he just did this, it'd be all right. You can't do any kind of movements that would look like a pitch at all.